And
I
of
will
course,
read.
today's, please.
Yes. Okay. Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. The seven realities: existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following. The only real existence is that of one and only God who is the self in every finite self. The only real love is the love for this infinity God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God. The only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things, body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. The only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand, without expectation of reward, when compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. The only real control is the discipline of the senses to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. The only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Avtar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you so much. We are in Maya. So Maya is what we are in, aren't we? But let's go and look at exactly what we're trying to do within the theme of Maya. So we read this in the sequence 4-2-3-1. We read 4, and it was not an easy read, but it was an interesting read for sure. Then we started and we were midway through part 2. But I believe that it would be worthwhile to do a recap of both the para headings so that we again get back into the groove. And if you all don't mind, we can read part 2 again from the beginning. It's just 2 pages. Okay, that's my
Yes,
proposal.
yes. Okay.
Okay, all right. So first, part 4. What is the essence? So we understood that God is above duality. The infinite cannot be the dual part of finite. I think we discussed quite a bit and enjoyed that conversation. The world of finite things is created by Maya. That I think is a clear understanding. Then there is an illusion of finitehood, right? That's for Maya itself. Maya, not limited by space and time, is that is something that it was tough to accept. But yes, once there is space and time, Maya actually goes on in an unlimited way, expanding that. Maya as infinite, but finally, in spite of that, Maya as infinite is ultimately untrue. And intellectual difficulty in understanding Maya, yes, we are still grappling with it. All of us are grappling with it. So finally, the best way to position Maya or put Maya in a deserving place is treating Maya as God's shadow, right? So it's not completely infinite, it's not limited by space and time, but It acts as God's shadow. Two states in which Maya does not exist. First state is the beyond, and the last after reaching super consciousness, right? So after reaching the seventh plane, Maya vanishes. Then the knowledge of realization was the summary. That was more in motherhood. I mean, it was just a summary kind of para, if you remember. Then we went to the part two, where we understood about the shackles of Maya. We'll read this again, like I said, a quick read without pauses till we get to the point where we left off last time. So, shackles of Maya, intellect plays into the hands of Maya. So, intellect is what is the reason why we fall into Maya or accept as the reality around us and take the apparent reality to a lot more credibility. False beliefs may seem self-evident, and then we were in the three sequence of identification. So we identify with the physical body, we identify with the subtle body, and then we identify with the mental body. Then you have to start shedding the last falsehood. Soul is beyond thinking, desiring, and doing. Illusion that soul is the agent. Belief that the soul is subject to dual experience, and nature of ensoulment of mind and bodies. So this is all what we're going to cover today, and then based on time, we can go to the next part as well. Yeah. Any thoughts before we go ahead?
No.
Silence is good, which means everybody is is either uh,
what
completely
struck me
convinced.
when you what struck me when you were reading the titles was ensoulment.
Yeah,
That's a term which needs a lot of explanation, I
yeah.
think.
Even in discourses, it's rarely used.
Mm,
Ensoulment of mind and bodies. So,
yes.
introduction of the soul into the mind and the body. That's what it means. Okay, so part two. Anybody wants to read? Babaji, you want to read?
I can
Or
read, or Mamaji wants, whatever.
whatever. Okay, so Ashok, go ahead. Part two, false
Avtar,
beliefs.
Avtar Meher Baba ki Jai. Part 2, False Beliefs. The shackles that hold the soul in spiritual bondage consist chiefly of wrong values or falsehoods concerning valuation. Some falsehoods in the nature of wrong beliefs also play an important part in holding the soul in spiritual bondage. False beliefs implement false values, and they in turn gather strength from the false values in which the soul has been hung up. All false beliefs are as much creations of Maya as are false values, and they are used by Maya to keep the soul still in ignorance in its clutches. The subtopic, shackles of Maya. The next subtopic, intellect plays into hands of Maya.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Maya becomes irresistible by taking possession of the very seat of knowledge, which is human intellect. Surmounting Maya is difficult because when the intellect under its sway, with the intellect under its sway, Maya creates barriers and upholds false beliefs and illusions. It creates barriers to the realization of the truth by persistent attempts to sustain and justify erroneous beliefs. The intellect that functions in freedom prepares the way to the truth. But the intellect that plays into the hands of Maya creates obstacles to true understanding. The false beliefs created by Maya are so deep rooted and strong that they seem to be self evident. They take on the garb of veritable truths and are accepted without question. The subtopic is false beliefs may seem self evident. For example, a person believes that he is his physical body. Ordinarily, it never occurs to him that he may be something other than his body. Identification with the physical body is assumed by him instinctively without requiring proof, and he holds the belief all the more strongly because it is independent of rational proof. Identification with physical body. An individual's life is centered around the physical body and its desires. To give up the belief that he is the physical body involves the giving up of all desires pertaining to the physical body and the false values they imply. The belief that he is his physical body is conducive to the physical desires and attachments. But the belief that he is other than his physical body runs counter to accepted desires and attachments. Therefore, the belief that the individual in his physical body becomes natural. It is a belief easy to hold and difficult to uproot. On the other hand, the belief that he is something other than his physical body seems to call for convincing proof. It is difficult to hold and easy to resist. All the same, when the mind is unburdened of all physical desires and attachments, the belief that he is his physical body is seen to be false, and the belief that he is something other than his body is seen to be true. Identification with subtle body. Even when a person succeeds in shedding the false belief that he is the physical body, he remains a victim of the false belief that he is his subtle body. His life is then centered around the subtle body and its desires. To give up the belief that he is the subtle body involves the giving up of all desires pertaining to the subtle body and the false values they imply. Therefore, the belief that he is his subtle body now becomes natural for him, and the belief that he is something other than his subtle body seems to call for convincing proof. But when the mind is unburdened of all desires and attachments pertaining to the subtle body, the person gives up the false belief that he is his subtle body as readily as he gave up the false belief that he was his physical body. Thus, this is not the end of false beliefs, however. Even when a person abandons the false belief that he is his subtle body, he cherishes the illusory belief that he is his mental body. The person cherishes this false belief because he relishes it. Throughout his long life as an individual soul, he has clung fondly to the false idea of his separate existence. The subtopic identification with mental body. All his thoughts and emotions and activities have repeatedly assumed and confirmed with one affirmation, namely the existence of the separate I. To surrender the false belief that he is the ego mind of the mental body is to surrender all that has seemed to constitute his very existence. Shedding last falsehood. In surrendering the false belief that he is his physical or subtle body, it is necessary to surrender various desires and attachments. It is a giving up of something one has had for a long time. In surrendering the false belief that he is his ego mind, the individual is called upon to surrender the very core of what he has thought himself to be. To shed this last vestige of falsehood is therefore the most difficult thing. But this last falsehood is no more lasting than the earlier falsehoods that had seemed to be challengeable certainties. It has its ending, and it is shed when the soul renounces its craving for separate existence. Soul is beyond thinking, desiring, and doing. When the soul knows itself to be different from the gross, subtle, and mental bodies, it knows itself to be infinite. As infinite soul, it does merely it does nothing. It merely is. When the mind is added onto the individualized soul, it appears to think. When the subtle body is added onto the soul with the mind, it appears to desire. When the gross body is added onto this, the soul appears to be engaged in actions. The belief that the soul is doing anything is a false belief. For example, an individual believes that he is sitting in the chair, but it is in fact the body that is sitting in the chair. The belief that the soul is sitting in the chair is due to the identification with the physical body. In the same way, a person believes that he is thinking, but in fact, it is the mind that is thinking. The belief that the soul is thinking is due to identification with the mind. It is the mind that thinks and the body that sits. The soul is neither engaged in thinking nor in any other physical actions.
Wow. So we'll stop there. I mean, we'll pause there. That's where we had stopped last Sunday. So this chapter focuses on the false values leading to false beliefs leading to associations, and the associations progress from body, which is the container that enables us to do actions. The next one is desire. That's where you have the subtle mind. And then the ability to think is where you go to when you start identifying with the mental body. So, though one can visualize or imagine that, oh, I'm on the spiritual path, and then I would not be in the clutches of Maya once I get into the spiritual path. Even in the other realms, that is the subtle world and the mental world, there is a false upholding of the association with the bodies. Only thing, uh, the the target of the association changes from the gross to the mental to the subtle, right? Uh, just for me, this visualization of the mind. So the mind is the key in this whole journey, right? So the visualization that I have in my head is, in the beginning, there was absolutely nothing that separates all of us, the soul, God, divinity, that's the beyond, right? Then you have this concept or this idea of the mind that gains existence, right? It comes into being, the mind. And that becomes the fulcrum of thinking, association, desiring, or experiencing, and all of that. And fortunately or unfortunately, it is also the receptacle that allows us to make this journey of understanding our true nature. Imagine there was no mind, then we wouldn't have done gone through God realization as well. So you still need the mind, but at the last point in the mental body, when you cross from the sixth to the seventh, you give that up as well. So it's like a huge climb onto a mountain, at which time, as you climb on the mountain, you drop off certain weights. Let's say you're carrying food for 3 days. First day, after you climb one-third of the mountain, you drop off the food and the waste. Probably you leave it behind. So you become lighter. Then you become further lighter on the third day. But then at some point, there's nothing left. So that's kind of the visualization or verbal visualization that I can make up. What do you guys think?
Nice explanation. Uh, then it stresses the need for this mind, even in the spiritual journey. So that is, as we read just before all the three classifications, in the last paragraph, there was a sentence which said that intellect is needed to surpass even intellect. So that sentence struck me. Uh, I
Was
think
it before
yeah,
this?
I think false beliefs. No, after that.
Yeah,
Uh,
intellect plays into the hands of Maya.
ha. So the last sentence here, false beliefs
The,
created by
the
Maya are so deep. The intellect that functions in freedom
in
prepares
freedom.
the way to the truth, but the intellect that plays into the hands of Maya create obstructions to true understanding. So we need the foothold of intellect initially
Beautiful word.
to
Foothold. You
go
need
out of that
some
place.
point of reference. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
So the beautiful word. I was struggling with something like that. So you need a
yes,
point of reference. So if you take a mathematical way of explaining it, you need a point of reference from where to make this journey. And that point of reference, fortunately and unfortunately, like this last line in this para, is the mind or the intellect
is the
or the
mind.
way, is the viveka, is the way to discern, is the way to understand, right? And
Yes,
that foothold is what helps you till the last step. And without that
yes,
foothold, you're lost because you don't know where you are. Where you are.
yes. As
Yeah.
you told
Mahu?
the example of the mountain climbing, so
Mhm.
we need all the paraphernalia to reach the pinnacle,
Certain
but
altitudes.
we have to drop them as we climb to be
Mhm.
totally free at the peak.
Top. Correct. Mahu, you unmuted. You want to say something?
Yeah, in addition to what was discussed, I was reminded of the 10th state of God in God Speaks and how this, the unconscious God has his desire to become conscious. And that's where, I think that's the state, God is state 4 as God as embodied soul, and that state is when um, the unconscious soul, which is Atma, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
In a state A, it doesn't have no consciousness, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And why that? And it hasn't. Therefore, it doesn't have no impressions. It doesn't have no sanskaras. But then, in order to gain consciousness and get to know who he is, who am I, right? At this stage, the it is necessary for the gross form, body, and gross world therefore subtle body and mental body and the world associated with those so they can function be created. And in order to do that, then there's got to be something that the soul is equipped with, so then it can make its connection, right? It can
Mhm.
identify with it, it can recognize it.
Mhm.
And that's where all that involution of consciousness happens. The infinite unconscious God, right,
Mhm.
which is unconscious soul, which is Atma, is trying to, it goes through that whole gamut of um, divine,
Experiences.
yeah, theme, the theme. And
Yes.
and then that's it. Yeah, like it's just this whole, if we see it in a bigger picture, it's just this whole cosmic architecture that is created by Paramatma at that point, the unattribute unconscious God. And then the creation starts, and then all this thing that we are beautifully Baba explains here, it's subsidized, it's a subset of all that big set. And what is that big set? That big set, big circle, is the creation, right? So it's a
Absolutely.
very interesting dynamic created by Baba.
And it's unavoidable, it's necessary that you go through this process. So after the whim, there is no like you painted in the biography of the soul, there is a necessity to experience and to reach the pinnacle, like you said, of the ability to understand, which can come only with the appropriate form. And then you go through evolution and reach the peak of evolution in the human form, and then you start the process of involution. So, and so in a
Yeah.
sense, there is a uh, to use the term word parts introduced to me, which is teleological, right? There is a purposefulness in this. There's a
Yeah.
driving purpose in this whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That's a good word. Yeah, that's very
yeah,
true.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
was just also thinking about what Baba taught to Premashram boys, and it is embedded in that meditation part of discourses. There is a way, if we really, really are determined to enter the path and be active in the path to God and eventually earn it, the final destination. And that is to meditate on that. And in that meditation, try to disassociate yourself from the three bodies and focus on your soul, right?
True,
And where
true.
is the soul? That's where Mer Baba is, and so forth. So little by little, and I'm sure Baba will help. Yeah, that's
Indeed.
one way.
Help, I hope he does to all of us.
He does, he
So,
does, yeah.
yes, 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 yes.
He's
So
gonna
then
give
let's
it to you in Amartiti, Kartik.
can't wait. Okay, so let's continue from, I mean, we'll start the fresh reading of today. So you're okay continuing for some more time, Ashok?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, please. So we start from, of course.
Of course, it is not mere mind or mere body that does the thinking or other physical actions. For mere mind and mere body do not exist. They exist as illusions of the individualized soul, and it is when the soul falsely identifies itself with them that the thinking or the doing of things occurs. The soul and mental, subtle, and gross bodies taken together constitute the agent of actions or the limited I. But the soul, in its true nature, is neither responsible for thinking, for desiring, nor for actions. illusion that soul is the agent is a subtopic. The illusion that the soul is the mind or the bodies, and the illusion that the soul is the agent of thinking, desiring, or actions are created by Maya, which is illusion and the principle of ignorance.
So again, to pause at that paragraph, this phrase is also very beautiful. So this can be a replacement for the word foothold, right? Another word that I like is locus, Locus. So the point of reference from where you're seeing the whole thing, right? So in the same way, an actions here is broader than just the gross body. So actions here is actions of the mind as well. If you read this line again, the soul and mental, subtle, and gross bodies taken together constitute the agent of actions. So that's the point of reference. That's the locus. That's the mind body complex that works on this path, right? So that's a good phrase. And the whole thing we think is soul. There's nothing. Soul is unaffected by this, actually. Right? Does that make sense?
Another point here is that this paragraph
Mhm.
clearly brings us to the stage of nirvana. So there is nothing left after all the three quotes are removed.
Correct.
So soul is there, that is existence. But what it is, what it does, everything is not clear at this point of time for me. So that is nirvana, getting rid of all the quotes and then remaining bare.
Mhm. Hold on to that thought.
Yes, yes, yes.
And then we'll continue. Yeah. Next subtopic.
Next subtopic, belief that the soul subject to dual experience. In the same way, the belief that the soul experiences the pleasures and pains of life or is going through the opposites of experience is also false. The soul is beyond the opposites of experience, but it does not know itself as such. And so it takes on the experiences that are characteristic of the opposites because of identification with the mind and the subtle and gross bodies. The soul that is mixed up with the mind and the bodies becomes the recipients of pains and pleasures. Thus, all pleasures and pains that one is subject to are rooted in ignorance.
So this continues the earlier paragraph. So it's illusory that these experiences are anything important. Uh, so yeah, continue.
Okay. When an individual thinks that he is the most miserable person in the world, he is embracing an illusion that comes into existence through ignorance or Maya. He is really not unhappy, but imagines that he is unhappy because he identifies himself with the mind and the bodies. Of course, it is not the mind by itself or the bodies by themselves that can have any experiences of the opposites. It is the soul and the mind and the bodies taken together that become the subject of dual experience. But the soul in its nature is beyond the opposites of experience.
Okay. So this is the last para now.
Yeah. The subtopic, nature of ensoulment of minds and bodies. Thus, it is the mind and the bodies together that constitute the agent of activities, and the subject of dual experiences. However, they do not assume this double role in their own right, but only when they are taken along with the soul. It is the mind and bodies which are ensouled that together become the agent of activities or the subject of dual experience. The process of ensoulment is based upon ignorance, for the soul in its true nature is eternally unqualified, unmodified, and unlimited. It appears to be qualified, modified, and limited through ignorance or the working of Maya.
So this is classical Shankara, right? So this is classical Vedanta, where the soul is said to be beyond the effects. So it is unaffected, it is unmodified, it's unlimited, I mean, infinite. All of the attributes that one hears of the Atma in Shankara is basically what is being confirmed here. But in the process, we understand the distinction between the soul, the body, and the mind, right? So I think that's what I take away from this. Any other thoughts? Any questions, comments before we go to the next part? Good. So let's see part three then. So we go to part three. Oh, how come this doesn't have the? Oh, there it is. Loads
I
after some time.
just wanted to uh, bring in a point here. So
Please.
I'm feeling a bit difficult in unmuting and muting. Okay, in my system. I don't know what is the problem.
So you can use the shortcut keys if you're on a Mac. You can use the keyboard shortcut, which is, are you on a Mac?
Yes,
So it's Command Shift M
Command Shift and
together. Command Shift M. So once you get used to it, that's the best way.
okay. I'll try that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They here this uh, the idea of consciousness is uh, not brought in here.
Yes. Yes.
That's a point which struggles. So, what is consciousness versus soul? And is soul covered with consciousness, or is soul equated to consciousness? All these points are bothering at this level, I think.
It's been bothering me from a long time because there's no definition even in infinite intelligence. So there is the heaviest use of consciousness in infinite intelligence, obviously. And even there, like you said, there is no definitive distinction that we have for where does soul end and where does consciousness, what is consciousness, what is soul, distinctly defined. And
Yeah.
all I can take away right now is it is one of the attributes, maybe I can say, of the soul, and it differs in strength and capacity because the consciousness of if you remember the lines from God Speaks, there is the consciousness and states are differentiated in the various forms, right? So there is obviously a difference in the consciousness, in the intensity and the power and the capabilities of the consciousness, which is also understandable given how evolution and involution progresses. So it's an aspect that is on the journey along with the journey of the soul. But where, I mean, more than that, I don't know. Like I said, I'm at sea as well.
Yes.
Any others?
Yes.
By the way,
Any
in the
Oh, sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Mahu.
No, actually, I don't know what I'm going to say would be related, but uh, actually, we read it. In fact, it was a very good reminder. We read it several weeks ago in the
Hmm.
discourses, right? And
Yes.
it was Baba actually very nicely, because I'm visual, so that example that he gave, it stayed with me.
The
And he
flashlight.
explained it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That flash. Yani, uh, so it is different. It is
yeah,
different. The consciousness is different than the soul. Soul is eternal, no attribute, nothing could be said about it, unfathomable, because that's Baba, right? But
yeah.
that's God.
Hmm.
But consciousness, Baba really opened it nicely in that part of discourses that we read together. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's also the nature of our learning process, right? Like you rightly said, now I clearly remember it was barely 2, 3 weeks back. Everybody was, I think, most of us that were on this call were there as well. We talked at length about flashlight. Yes, thank you for that reminder. But even there, it is a process or aspect that is subservient or in parallel at best to the process of the soul. To add to Mamaji's question,
I'm sorry, repeat that part, last part. It is.
what I'm saying is, even there, it is one of the aspects that uh, coexist along with the journey of the soul. So, if
Yeah.
one were to take that analogy of the flashlight and try to attempt a definition of what consciousness is, I don't know how to define it. So, is it the ability to discern? Is it the um, um, is it, so if you, the word in equivalent word, acceptable equivalent word in Hinduism or Vedanta is Chaitanya. Now,
Yeah,
Chaitanya by the,
Chaitanya.
yeah,
Mm.
but Chaitanya by the very literal meaning is the life giving or the the mm, what how do we describe Chaitanya? Chaitanya is basically the life giving aspect of something. So something has Chaitanya. Okay, the better word is earth and inert. So something is inert means that it doesn't have Chaitanya. If it has Chaitanya, it is not inert, right?
Right.
So so that's again, to me that's an attribute or a aspect. That's what I was saying in the last part.
Yeah.
Mama,
Uh,
any comments from your side? Yeah, go ahead, Mama.
no, I was gonna say, I don't even remember. This infinite intelligence, you read it once and then a week or 2 weeks later you forget. But when Baba
It's tough,
explains,
yes.
yeah, it would be nice to read it at least a couple times. But when Baba explains about that infinite false mind, I
Mhm.
think that infinite false mind um, is where the consciousness is.
Infinite false mind, if I remember right, is where the consciousness is at max capacity. So it's the human mind which does not have any limitations on imagination, but it is focused on the wrong aspect. So it does not focus on God. It's focused, thanks to Maya, on the illusory universe. That's what I remember of the IFM, infinite false mind. And then we go to the
Yeah,
infinite
but
real
it's
mind in the
more
process of
than that,
evolution.
Curtis. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. But it's more than that, because I also thought that it belongs to the human before. I read this infinite intelligence, but it starts from all animate and inanimate. It starts from a stone Even a stone have an infinite false mind. Metal, bird, all that, evolution of consciousness. But then when it gets to human, no, I'm sorry. Oh, I made a mistake. I'm very sorry. Yeah, you're right. It is human that has an infinite false mind. Those
Yes,
guys
exactly.
are finite.
Finite minds. Yeah.
Yeah, those are finite. I made a mistake. Yeah. Okay.
So Karthik,
Yeah, sure.
if we add, see, Chaitanya, if you look at the meaning of Chaitanya, that is consciousness or awareness. Hello. So Chaitanya means
Yes, what is it
consciousness.
defined?
No, my point is that Chaitanya, you're
We all
saying.
agree with that.
Sorry, I can't hear
So
you.
we agree with that. Sure. So how
Okay,
do we
okay.
define it? Can you hear me
How do
now?
we define
Can you hear me now?
consciousness?
Can the others hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
The question on the topic is how do we define consciousness?
No, that is a very
Tough one.
a deep area of research.
No, I mean, Baba has not defined it, but analogy, yes. References, many. But yeah, something to ponder.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to Maya part 3. What is there in part 3? So we start with
Can
aspect
we
of discerning.
consciousness?
Yeah,
Just
please
a
go ahead.
point. Can
Comment.
we,
Yeah.
in some way, equate consciousness with awakening? What Baba has told.
Yeah, we can. That's something to think about.
Think about it.
So
Because
he
all our
starts the
struggle is
process of
to.
awakening and through the use of the emerging or increasing consciousness. Something to think about, something to meditate on.
Yes.
But again, that doesn't give the answer of what is consciousness. The awakening, yes, is a somewhat of a simile for consciousness. But in the Baba world, I know exactly what you mean, and I think that's something to think about, surely. And this is something to go and ask Ward as well if I run into him in Amar Tithi. So I'm going to ask him,
Yes.
has he come across a definitive source for within the Baba literature or consciousness? Okay,
I think that
Okay.
that is
so
the state
what
of
are we doing?
state of knowing everything, state of understanding everything. What's the reality? What's
Is
the
that
truth?
is that is that Baba literature?
No.
That's the problem. So dictionary term, yes, there are many different, many meanings. So if because knowing, yeah. So I don't know. So from the
Mm,
Baba way, I don't know how to define it. Sure. So let's just see the subtopics in Maya 3. So we start with discerning falsehood. In falsehood, there is suspicion and fear. Third one is falsehood itself, falsehoods, analogy of functional and structural diseases, importance of purifying intellect. So we understood intellect and the role for the intellect. So now there is a purification of the intellect. Then you have citadels of Maya. Citadels is fortresses of Maya. Clarity of perception from inner purity. God as the only truth. God is indivisible. No opinions or ways of thinking within soul. So again, soul is independent and freestanding. So there's no opinion there and no multiple ways of thinking, is what is being said. Soul is infinite thought and intelligence. So here's a para or a subtopic that actually has infinite and intelligence together years after the intelligence notebooks and in discourses. God is the only reality, is the way part 3 ends. Okay. So let's go and start reading. We have any volunteer to read? Kiran, do you want to read today? Back after a long time. Good to see you.
Yeah, Jai Baba. Yeah, I can read. Give me just a minute. I just need to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, all yours. Part 3.
Yeah, thank you. Transcending the falsehoods of Maya. Countless are. Yeah, I think the subtitle is discerning falsehood.
My
Countless are the
recommendation is
falsehoods.
pause after a para and surely
Okay.
pause after a topic. Right. So we'll just
Okay.
discuss and there's no rush.
Yeah. Okay. Countless are the falsehoods that a Maya-ridden person embraces in the stupor of ignorance. And from the very beginning, falsehoods carry within themselves this brings one to the question, how does one discern the falsehood as falsehood? There is no way out of falsehood except by knowing it as falsehood. But this knowledge of falsehood as falsehood would never come unless it was in some way latent in falsehood itself from the very beginning.
Wow.
I,
That's tough.
yeah.
How is falsehood latent in falsehood from the very beginning? Anyone? I don't know how to make sense of this. So so sooner or later, they are known to be falsehoods. This brings one to the question, how does one discern the falsehood as falsehood? There's no way out of falsehood except by knowing it as falsehood, but the knowledge of falsehood as falsehood would never come unless it was in some way latent in falsehood itself from the very beginning. My counter to that is it was falsehood to start with. So, what's the latency? It's just that our awareness of it as being falsehood was absent initially, and in the end, it was falsehood all along. So, if you box it and look at it, it was falsehood. We attributed it wrongly. We ascribed it with wrong values, false values, and missed the falsehood. This is the way I understand it. Is that a fair? Is that a fair way to see it?
Yes, I think to an extent, because if we say go back and see beyond the stage of who am I, there is nothing.
Correct.
So that is the thing. And then this question of who am I itself is a wrong concept. So unknowing who am I am asking who am I. But unknowing, fact of unknowing itself is the beginning of falsehood. When you are and you cannot be defined, why you are thinking of who am I? So that is the beginning of this falsehood. So falsehood is inbuilt from the beginning. So we cover it with all the necessary, valuations, and then begin thinking that it is the truth. So that is the way, that's what is told here. Knowledge of falsehood as falsehood never come unless it was some way latent in falsehood itself from the very beginning. Jai Baba.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah, in falsehood, there is a suspicion and fear. The acceptance of falsehood is always a forced compromise. Even in the very depths of ignorance, the soul gives some kind of challenge to falsehood. However feeble and inarticulate it may seem to be in its initial stages, it is the beginning of that search for the truth which ultimately annihilates all falsehood and all ignorance. In the acceptance of a falsehood, there is an ever-growing restlessness, a deep suspicion, and a vague fear. For example, when an individual considers himself and others to be identical with the gross body, he cannot completely reconcile himself to this belief. In embracing this false belief, there is fear of death and fear of losing others. If a person depends for his happiness only upon the possession of forms, he knows in his heart that he is building his castles on shifting sands, that this surely is not the way to abiding happiness, that the support he so desperately clings to may give way any day. Hence, he is deeply suspicious of his grounds.
Excellent, para, right?
Yeah.
So it's the biggest, if I dare say, use another word, it's the biggest hypocrisy that we learn to live with. We learn to live with the fact that we are mortal, and in fact take it for granted, and uh, put it at the back of our mind. And the falsehood gains a life of its own, right? And but in all this, at the back of our minds, there is that fear, there is that insecurity, there is that stress, which bravado, human ego, possession of or acquiring of success makes you minimize it, but the fear is there. Even the richest person in the world, even the well-to-do, have the fear of, hey, this is a false belief, this is a false value. The intensity and the amount of time you and energy you give to that thought and that idea is very less in the non-spiritual people, non-existent one, I may dare say. But as you get spiritual, you are able to reconcile and deal with that monster and address that fear. But fear, it's there at the back of your mind. You all agree?
Yes, this constantly uh, both sort of fear drives you either way. When you are out of fear, your trajectory or movement is in the spiritual area. If you are with fear, but unknowingly, then you are in the mortal world. That's how I see it.
Sure. Correct. Great. So let's continue. Falsehood betrays
Yeah.
itself. So one is falsehood creates this sense of fear. Now we'll see how falsehood gives itself away. Falsehood betrays itself. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. The individual is restlessly aware of his own insecurity. He knows that something is wrong somewhere and that is counting upon false hopes. Falsehood is preciously unreliable. He simply cannot afford to embrace it forever. He might as well garland himself with a poisonous snake or go to sleep on the top of a volcano that is only temporarily inactive. Falsehood bears the hallmark of being incomplete and unsatisfactory, temporary and provisional. It points to something else. It appears to the person to be hiding something greater and truer than what it seems to be. Falsehood betrays itself and in doing so leads one on to know the truth.
Yeah, I would beg of you to all of you to dwell for a few seconds on those two analogies, very powerful analogies. One is garlanding yourself with a snake, and the other is sleeping on a volcano, being aware that you're sleeping on a volcano, right? So it's imminent, it is uncertain, and it can go off in a way where it can cause so much of damage. Imagine having a snake around your neck. Right. So just dwell on those two analogies for a bit and amuse yourself to see how close, up close and personal we are with this falsehood, and by that it actually is betraying itself. Okay, let's continue.
Kartik, I like to add something to this.
Sure.
You know that, like when you said that we could actually consider these two analogy, right?
Mhm, mhm.
To realize or be with our falsehood, knowing that it is false and knowing how poisonous it is. Once it's wrapped around our neck, or it's always ready to be explode or whatnot. Um, but this process, I think, also it takes time for the aspirant or for the individual, because um, it's like Baba talks about, at some point talks about divine disappointment, that you are actually uh, kind of getting into the disappointed position, restlessness, knowing all this is nothing but illusion and it's false, but you're not completely in terms with it. That means, uh, we have to really become numb. I always think about, not always, like sometimes I think about it. It's, you really have to become numb about this poison effect of falsehood. You see what I'm saying? Otherwise, if you really constantly want think about poisonous snake around your neck, or I mean, this exaggeration, or volcano, it could bring you some fear, fear of unknown, or like a little bit, living fearfully. But if you really becomes numb about it, like knowing that this is all illusion, regardless, it's all illusion, so it's not real. Baba says it doesn't even exist. If we come to that term with it, then life become much easier, I think. That's my
I'm struggling.
experience, actually.
Yeah, so that each one to themselves, right? So I'm struggling with how numbness can help me uncover this. I am reminded of the opposite actually. Baba uses the word desperateness, right? So let's say I have the snake around me, or I'm sleeping on this volcano. At some point, this falsehood gets to me. I become desperate, and desperate for seeking the true nature and moving away from these false values and these false beliefs. And it starts very gradually, or it starts with a very small seed. Oh, is this false? And then it gathers momentum to a point where I reach a point of desperation, to use Baba's term, divine desperation, right?
Right.
Right. So rather than numbness, I was reminded of desperation. But as I said, each one to themselves on how they can understand and wrap their heads around this concept. But yes, others, any
Yeah,
other
no, you're
comments?
right. No, you're right. I mean, your way might even work better to become tired of it. Just get irritated by its falseness, knowing
Yes.
that it's just you're in a, my I call it Mayavi grip. You're in a grip of it. Yes, there is nothing you can do about it. You just have to live with it, but little by little disassociate yourself with it. Just take a step further and further and further. So your distance is further and further than if there is a point called falsehood. You know
Correct.
what I mean? Like
Yes,
I
absolutely.
like to share this experience. Um, there is this place I go to. If you guys don't mind, just takes 1 minute.
Sure.
Yeah, but I go to gym for exercise. I have to. I need it. So there's this class, and I do attend classes. But there is in these classes, even though that I try to be early, you never can find a space. We run out of equipment, and people are in such a hurry, and I would say greed about this. And so like they feel like this space is theirs, or they bought it. It's just such a sense of falseness they have toward it, and they're attack you. But it has been repeated. I guess Baba is really behind it toward me. Just keep on getting all these reactions, and it really disturbs me. But then the other day, when it happened, all of a sudden, I had this kind of vision or understanding that Baba gave. I guess it was really giving me a relief. It's all imagination. Like I looked at all these ladies, all these people that are striving, so thirsty to have one more spot and one more equivalent, one more. It's all, Baba said, it's illusory, it's non existent. So don't even bother. That's the numbness I'm talking about. Really don't
Yeah.
get entangled with it, I would say. That's all.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah. I just saw. I'm reminded of uh, how your gym experience is actually analogous to the material world in the sense. I exactly was able to visualize what you go through when you go to the gym, right? I hate the gym, by the way.
Yeah, most people are actually because of that. Yeah.
1 second. I think use the brush. Well, 1 second. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So I was saying, your gym analogy reminded me of my days or my attempts to go to the gym as well. It's so close to what we see in the material world. You walk into the gym, there's loud music, exercise music that's blasting away, and there are equipment all around you. Some are taken, some are not taken. There is, as you rightly said, the beautiful word greed, right? There is a greed to get to the equipment, and once you get to the equipment, there is a greed to dominate it for as long as you can, and so
Yeah,
it's a race, right?
it is a
And
race,
it's so
unfortunately.
it's a
So
race,
bad.
and
Yeah.
it's so bad, and it brings the worst in us. So it's a very good example of the material world
Yes.
itself. The material world
Yes.
is just that. It's a series of treadmills that we are faced with around us, and we are just fighting for those few minutes to supposedly improve our lives, because if you spend 10 minutes on that treadmill, it's supposed to help you and so on. So I love your analogy.
Yeah, and
Right.
it's been repeating itself. So I think there is something in it that Baba wants me to learn from it. And that's why I'm sharing it here so we all can relate to it at some point. Like you said,
Take
not
my
gym,
word,
but other, yeah.
if you have the time and if you have the opportunity, weather permitting, enjoy
But
yourself outside. Forget the gym. There's enough you can do without equipment to be healthy.
That's true.
We talk about that offline. I mean,
Yeah.
weather permitting, of course. Yeah, weather is a tough thing. And just to give you an indication, so much that I hate the gym is even in Dubai, where it gets up to 120, 130 degrees in the summer. My bragging right is I never went to the gym. I used to get up at 5 in the morning and finish my walk when it was pitch dark, because that's the only time you can walk. The rest of the time is UV. There's UV risk and it's too hot, right? So, but I preferred that over that sacrifice of getting up early and getting out and walking in the dark to actually getting on a gym. That's how much I hate it. Anyway, that's me and you, I guess. Let's not
Yes.
derail the call, and apologies for that brief disconnect. Let's continue. Let's look at the two types of falsehood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Two, yeah, two types of falsehood. Falsehood are of two types. Those that arise due to irregular and loose thinking, and those that arise due to vitiated
Vitiate.
thinking. Vitiated thinking.
Vitiated thinking.
Vitiated
Vitiated
thinking.
thinking.
Vitiated
Yeah.
thinking. Falsehoods that arise due to irregular thinking are less harmful, and those that arise from vitiated thinking. The untruths of a purely intellectual nature arise because of some mistake in the application of the intellect, whereas falsehoods that are important from the spiritual point of view arise because of the vitiation of the intellect through the operation of blinding and unreasoning desires.
Vitiation is basically a word which we can look up.
Imagination, right?
Yeah, implies a destruction of purity, validity, or effectiveness. Let's go and see dictionary.com. Wow. Yeah. To impair the quality of or make faulty. Something is good, you're making it impure, you're making it faulty. To impair or weaken the effectiveness of, to debase, corrupt, or pervert. So I think any of the top three is the meaning that we are seeing in the book now. So there are two types of falsehood according to Baba. One is irregular and loose thinking, and those that arise due to vitiated thinking. Um, so vitiation is impure, but then that's what is linked to spirituality, is what Baba is saying. Falsehoods
So
that are
that's
important from the spiritual point of view arise because of the vitiation of the intellect through the operation of blinding and unreasoning desires. Yeah, you're saying something, Mamaji.
that last sentence is a bit difficult to fathom, I think. Whereas falsehoods that are important from the spiritual point of view arise because of the vitiation of the intellect through the operation of blinding and unreasoning desires. Say that then the unreasoning desires and the operation of blinding will vitiate the intellect, and the understanding which arises out of that vitiation, if you can break through that, then it leads to spiritual point of view, I think. If you understand that there is vitiation of the intellect through the operation of blinding and unreasoning, then there is a way for you in the spiritual path, I think. That's how you have to understand, I think. So otherwise, it gives a say actually the other way of understanding this. I don't connect this with spiritual point of view unless we understand like this. I hope I
So there is an
made my
analogy
point.
coming up. There's an analogy coming up just to explain this. So let's read
Ah,
that and let's see if we can discuss after that. So go
yes.
ahead with the next paragraph.
Yeah. Analogy of functional and structural diseases. The difference between these two types of falsehood may be brought out by a psychological and
psychological analogy.
Physiological analogy.
Physiological analogy. Some disorders of the vital organs of the body are functional and some are structural. Functional diseases arise because of some irregularity in the functioning of a vital organ. In these cases, there is nothing seriously wrong with the structure of the vital organ. It has merely become sluggish or irregular and needs only slight stimulation or correction in order to function properly. In structural disorders, the disease comes into existence because of the development of some deformity in the structure or constitution of the vital organ. In these cases, the disorder of the vital organ is of much graver nature. It has become damaged or rendered inefficient due to some tangible factor that has affected the very constitution of the organ. Both types of diseases can be corrected, but it is far easier to correct merely functional disorders than to correct structural ones.
So which is functional in the analogy and which is structural? So the falsehoods that are vitiation of the intellect are structural. Functional are the one that are purely irregular or loose thinking, is my understanding. So at least the analogy, before we get to applying the analogy to the previous para, I think that's the analogy is clear. So some things are functional, some things are structural. Functional can be fixed. Structural needs a lot more work to fix. You have to maybe surgically do or whatever significant stuff to be done. In the same way, this in the falsehoods, the simple one is where you just have a thinking that's irregular, right? Irregular and loose. Whereas anything that is far more deeper is structural, is the way I would understand this. Now, is that clear?
Can we please, Karthik, I'm sorry, can we please read that paragraph again where it starts from the analogy? If you go up a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
from here, what is it? The difference between these two types, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I read out?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. The difference between these two types of falsehood may be brought out by a physiological analogy. Some disorders of the vital organs of the body are functional and some are structural. Functional diseases arise because of some irregularity in the functioning of a vital organ. In these cases, there is nothing seriously wrong with the structure of the vital organ. It has merely become sluggish or irregular and needs only slight stimulation or correction in order to function properly. In structural disorders, the disease comes into existence because of the development of some deformity in the structure or constitution of the vital organ. In these cases, the disorder of the vital organ is of a much graver nature. It has become damaged or rendered inefficient due to some tangible factor that has affected the very constitution of the organ. Both types of diseases can be corrected, but it is far easier to correct merely functional disorders than to correct structural ones.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Dr. I think he wants to make comment.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mamaji.
Yeah, I think this is sort of a thing where, say, a soul in this life has reached, after some evolutionary and say reincarnation process, to a level of understanding. Uh, that is the first example, and it needs a prodding by a master or grace of the master to suddenly realize the path in spirituality. Whereas the soul, which is still in the evolutionary process or just in the beginning of the reincarnation process, cannot be helped in this life. It has to go through umpteen number of lives and then get corrected. These are the two shades which come to my mind while reading this repeatedly. Jai
Yeah,
Baba.
the complexity in the second one can be inferred to mean that you need many births.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that's a good corollary. But I think more importantly, I think the difference is one of significant magnitude. Like one is a
Yes.
simple problem, one is a very complex problem. So the vitiating type is a very complex falsehood. The first one is a basic falsehood, which is
Yes.
just solvable, easier to solve.
So, Kartik, if I may, I don't know, maybe
Sure.
I want to use this example regard to the organ.
Hmm.
For
Sure.
example, just totally imaginary. I'm just discussing or sharing. Like, consider someone's liver. Okay, liver is one of the organs, right, in the body. If due to the bad, let's say, diet or drinking and so forth, the liver start, acting and reacting, and it's not really in a good position doing its job. But suppose that you get cancer, or you get cancer in some part of your body, and the cells of that liver gets cancerous. Okay, so to cure that liver that has a cancer is much more complicated. There's a lot of risk involved. You don't even know if it's going to be completely well. Like Mamaji said, it may require another lifetime, and so forth, because the depth of it is so thick. So perhaps that's, what we can, I can think of it like this. And the vitiation of the intellect, I don't really know what it is. I know the translation was interrupt or maybe impact, but I think that's the part that ego mind really gets involved through our intellect, or with our intellect, trying to dictate certain things or interpretation or understanding to us that are totally unreal, and we think it's real. So it really is like a magician. It takes us away. We just tap into this falsehood. We think that it's real, right? True, because intellect can come with a lot of fancy stuff on fancy analysis and this and that, and somehow make us convinced that yes, for example, such and such guru is real, or like Mir Baba is not God, things like that. So I can see it in that respect somehow is, yeah.
Agreed.
That,
Agreed. Yeah, I think. Uh, but what you described from an academic standpoint, the cancer still is functional, not structural. Structural is where, let's say, congenitally there is a defect in the liver, right? Which uh, uh, which can't be fixed without surgery. That's structural. The damage caused through uh, lifestyle and behavior and food and so on is actually functional. But in the intensity that you described, the cancer and hence life-threatening impact and hence multiple lives, yes, that part is agreed. So if you look at it analogously,
Yes.
strictly speaking, that sounded more like functional than structural.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's read one more para before we are closing for the day. Yeah, so we'll take up citadels from next week. So we'll do importance of purifying intellect.
Importance of purifying intellect. Falsehoods that arise due to some irregularity in the application of the intellect or like functional disorders, and falsehoods that arise due to the vitiation of the intellect or like structural ones. Just as the functional disorders are easier to correct than the structural, falsehoods arising out of irregularity in the application of the intellect are easier to correct than those that arise due to the uh,
Vitiation.
vitiation of
Initiation.
intellect. Vitiation of intellect. In order to correct a functional disease of the vital organ, all that is necessary is to give it a better tone and strength. If there is a structural disease, it is often necessary to perform an operation. In the same way, if falsehoods arise due to some mistakes in the application of the intellect, all that is necessary is more carefulness in the application of the intellect. But if falsehoods arise due to the vitiation of the intellect, it is necessary to purify the intellect. This requires the painful process of removing those desires and attachments that are responsible for vitiating the intellect.
Perfect. So I think it's far more clearer now.
Yeah,
Yes.
Baba
So
really solved it now. Yeah.
yeah. Now it's far more clearer. So structural, functional. Structural is more complicated, and both are of Maya, both are of falsehood, and it's just the nature and the intensity and strength of one is more than the other, and hence the solution also is tougher, right? Great.
Yeah, Baba
So
says that
any
about the structural, I think the last sentence is the good opening, like conclusion. It says this requires the painful process of removing those desires and attachment that are responsible for vitiating the intellect. That could really be some of the low desires that Baba says it exists all the way to even sixth plane. And the
yeah,
process of removing it could be very, you have to go through a lot of suffering and this and that to balance it out or something.
yes, very true. Any others? Any thoughts before we wrap up?
Karthik, I just wanted to add one thing, and that is that in trying to see the way we behave, so our thoughts might be, impure thoughts might be functional, but if we speak and do conduct, then that might be having a graver uh, consequence. And in terms of our behavior, I was just trying to correlate what we
Action.
read with action. Yes. So thought,
Yeah. Worst one is action, and lesser impact is from thought.
yes.
Word is middle.
So I'm
Yeah,
just trying to correlate.
good. Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah.
Great. So let's
Great
take
read.
up
Thank you.
Citadel. Absolutely, great read. As I agree. Look forward to next week where we take up Citadels of Maya. Also, we need to pick a Saturday book, the book of experiences, the book of the heart. So we did sobs and throbs. So any recommendations, please hit me up with your ideas. Um, so we can pick up one of those books. And anyway, like we discussed yesterday, we finalized over tea at what's the name you've given your house, Sanjay? Meher what? Meher Abode, Meher. What's the name you've given? Oh, there you are. There you are in your house. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay. Jai Baba, everyone.
Yeah.
No
Jai Baba.
separate name for the house, but it's a flat
Okay.
in the Meher Bliss colony.
Yeah. Meher Bliss. Yeah. So,
So it's in Mare
okay.
Colony, Sanjay. So your
No,
house is
Stop
it's
in.
near
recording.
MPR, not in the Meher colony.